Avoidants are predictable once you understand their psychology. They crave closeness, but only when it's safely out of reach. The moment you start chasing, explaining, or proving your worth, they relax, not because they love you, but because they know they're in control again. That's the game. They feed on your pursuit because it allows them to hide from their own fear of intimacy. To outplay an avoidant, you have to understand one rule. They're addicted to the illusion of control. When they pull away, they expect you to follow. When they go silent, they expect you to fill the space. Every reaction from you confirms their power. That's why your silence is more dangerous than your words. It breaks the pattern they depend on to feel safe. So the move is simple but radical. Stop reacting. When they withdraw, you don't chase, you match their distance. When they go quiet, you don't panic, you mirror their calm. Not to punish, but to demonstrate something they've never experienced before, someone who can stay composed in uncertainty. You become the one thing they can't predict. This isn't indifference, it's precision. You're no longer giving them emotional control. You're showing them that connection with you is a privilege, not a guarantee. That's the moment the power shifts. They start watching your energy. They notice the difference in your tone, your absence, your ease. It unnerves them because they can no longer script your behavior. And when an avoidant can't predict you, they can't control you. When they can't control you, they start chasing you. If you want to learn exactly how to make the avoidant chase, subscribe to the channel. The next part will show you how to turn their own psychology in your favor. Avoidants test people without realizing it. Every time they pull away, go cold, or suddenly act indifferent, it's not just detachment. It's data collection. They're watching how you respond to distance. Do you chase? Do you panic? Do you start proving? Because if you do, you confirm their belief. They're safe as long as they stay in control. So when you stop reacting, you don't just confuse them. You disrupt their entire emotional blueprint. Here's how the test works. When they withdraw, it's a trap disguised as silence. Most people fill that space with reassurance. Did I do something wrong? Are you okay? I just want to talk. To the avoidant, those words don't read as care. They read as surrender. You've just given them emotional leverage. The power move is to do the opposite. When they pull away, you pull inward, not outward. You stay composed, consistent, and unavailable for drama. You don't post quotes about detachment. You don't pretend not to care. You simply stop feeding the dynamic. Here's what happens next, and this is where it gets interesting. The avoidant expects the usual chase. When they don't get it, they start to wonder, did I misread them? Why aren't they reacting? That confusion is your advantage. It cracks their emotional armor, and through that crack, curiosity starts to grow. You've now flipped the polarity. They used to study your reactions. Now they're analyzing your silence. They check your stories, your texts, your energy, looking for the signal they've lost control. And when they can't find it, their mind starts to spiral. The same anxiety they used to trigger in you begins to echo inside them. You don't fight for attention. You let attention return to you by force of absence. Because power in these dynamics doesn't belong to the one who speaks first. It belongs to the one who can stay silent the longest without losing their center. That's how you win the test, by refusing to take it. An avoidance calm is a performance. Beneath that silence sits a controlled nervous system that depends on your pursuit to stay steady. The second you stop reacting, that stability cracks. They tell themselves they don't care, but their mind starts scanning for you anyway. The game they designed to feel safe suddenly turns against them. Here's how it unfolds. After a few days of distance, they expect a message. When it doesn't come, they scroll through your feed. They check who you're with. They start replaying your last conversation. Still nothing. Now they feel something they swore they'd never feel again: uncertainty. Avoidants hate uncertainty more than closeness. When they can predict you, they feel powerful. When they can't, they lose the only shield they've ever had. That's when panic creeps in. You've taken away their control without saying a single word. This is the moment you hold your ground. Don't break the silence to soothe them. Don't explain yourself. Let them wonder. Your restraint forces them to face the emotional vacuum they created, and for once, they can't blame you for filling it. What happens next is involuntary. Their thoughts begin to loop. Did they meet someone else? Were they ever really attached? Did I push too far? Those questions are the first signs of the chase. You've redirected their focus from controlling you to decoding you. You'll notice small shifts, a random emoji, a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" Messages meant to test if the door's still open. That's their anxiety talking, not confidence. You've turned the game around by mastering what they never could, emotional discipline. Remember, the goal isn't to punish, it's to reset the balance. You're showing them that connection with you can't be built on control. And when they realize that, they'll start moving toward you, not because you demanded it, but because your calm became the only place that feels safe again. What looks like a sudden change of heart is really a control check. The avoidant re-enters not because they've had an epiphany about love, but because your silence exposed their dependency on being chased. They return quietly, cautiously, testing the water, not diving in. The message they send first will always sound casual. "Hey, just thought of you. How have you been?" It's never direct, because directness equals vulnerability. Here's where most people lose the upper hand. They rush to respond, relieved, hopeful, hungry for closure. That one message feels like proof that they finally care. But the truth? It's just a probe. They're not checking on you. They're checking if they still have access. The move now is to answer from composure, not emotion. Your tone should be warm but contained. Short sentences, no explanations, no nostalgia. You respond as if you've been fine, because you have. This neutral confidence sends one clear signal. You no longer control my emotional climate. Watch what happens next. The avoidant, expecting old patterns, doesn't know how to read you. You're not angry, but you're not eager either. That calm uncertainty pulls them in deeper. They start to engage more often, trying to gauge whether your balance is real or strategic. Their curiosity becomes effort. Their effort becomes investment. At this stage, you've already won the game because you've stopped playing it. You've transformed their need for control into a need for clarity, and the only way for them to find that clarity is to move toward you, slowly, consistently, on your terms. The power you hold now isn't in what you say, but in what you no longer need to say. You've made emotional steadiness your strategy, and to an avoidant, that's irresistible. The first time the avoidant reaches out, it's a test. The second time, it's instinct. Once they sense that they no longer have emotional control, something unfamiliar awakens inside them, pursuit. But here's the trap most people fall into. They confuse pursuit with commitment. The avoidance chase is delicate. Push too hard, and they retreat. Pull too far, and they detach completely. Your job now is to maintain tension without chaos, the balance between access and mystery. Here's how. Never overinvest when they reappear. When they offer a small gesture, you don't reward it with full availability. You meet energy with energy, not emotion with emotion. They text after days of silence. You wait. You answer warmly but briefly. You don't explain your absence. You don't recap your feelings. You simply respond like someone whose life has continued. That subtle control is what keeps them coming closer. Avoidants are hunters of emotional equilibrium. When you don't overgive, you create scarcity, and scarcity heightens value. But your restraint can't feel manipulative. It must feel natural, effortless. That's the art. The more you embody peace, the more they crave your presence to regulate their own discomfort. They'll start conversations they once avoided, ask questions they used to deflect, seek emotional cues they once ignored. And this is where you must stay still inside yourself. Do not start chasing again under the illusion of progress. They're not healed, they're intrigued. Your consistency is what keeps them engaged. Your emotional self-sufficiency is what makes them respect you. The moment you start performing, they feel the shift and instinctively retreat. You are now the stable force in their unpredictable world. They don't chase you to conquer. They chase you to feel grounded. That's why you must keep your internal state stronger than their external behavior. Let them reach, let them question, let them feel the absence of your old self. Because every time they do, they step closer, not just to you, but to their own reflection. You'll know it's happening not because they say it, but because their behavior starts to contradict their old patterns. They linger longer in conversations. They ask subtle, personal questions they once avoided. They remember details you never expected them to care about. They're still cautious, still measured, but now there's a flicker of vulnerability behind their composure. That's not manipulation. That's exposure. Avoidants don't fall the way most people do. They descend in silence, terrified of their own feelings. Connection for them is like standing at the edge of a cliff, thrilling and dangerous at once. The difference this time is you've removed the safety net of your pursuit. So every step closer they take feels like a risk they chose, not a reaction they were forced into. That choice changes everything. Here's what's happening psychologically. By staying centered, you've rewired their association between closeness and pressure. You've made proximity feel safe again. You've trained them, without a word, that intimacy doesn't mean loss of freedom. That discovery unsettles them and fascinates them. But don't misread their interest as readiness. When avoidants start to fall, their fear of losing control intensifies. They may suddenly pull back, vanish for a day or two, or act indifferent again. That's not regression. It's their nervous system panicking at the feeling of emotional exposure. The mistake most people make here is breaking composure, chasing again, trying to soothe the fear away. You don't. You hold steady. Here's the tactic. When they withdraw, you do nothing. No follow-up text, no confrontation. You continue your rhythm. That silence sends a stronger message than any reassurance ever could. You're not a threat to their freedom. And paradoxically, that's what draws them back faster than pleading ever will. Avoidants don't fall for people who chase. They fall for people who master detachment. Because to them, your restraint equals emotional safety. And emotional safety is the one thing they've been running from and longing for all along. When the avoidant finally starts opening up, it won't look like a confession. It'll sound like fragments. Half-thoughts, subtle admissions, little hints dropped in between distractions. They'll share something small, a story from childhood, a quiet insecurity, a phrase like, "I don't usually talk about this." That's not random. That's an emotional test. They're watching to see if you'll handle their vulnerability the same way others handled their fear, with pressure, pity, or panic. Here's the move. Don't flinch. You mirror calm understanding, not emotional rescue. You listen without trying to fix, respond without trying to deepen it immediately. The key is containment. They expect exposure to lead to overwhelm. But when your response is simple, grounded, even slightly understated, you create a new emotional rule in their mind. Closeness with this person doesn't cost me control. That's how you deepen the bond, by being the calm in their storm. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional volatility. They watch for cues that tell them when it's time to retreat. So your greatest strength is subtle consistency. You let them speak and then go quiet again. You don't chase the next confession. You let the silence stretch without fear. That silence becomes the first safe space they've ever felt with another person. You're not seducing them. You're retraining their nervous system. The moment they realize that your presence doesn't threaten their autonomy, they begin to associate you with calm instead of risk. That's when emotional attachment starts to grow, not through intensity, but through repetition. Small, quiet moments where nothing is demanded, nothing is dramatized, and everything simply is. Your control here is invisible but absolute. Because while they're learning to open up, you've already mastered the art of restraint. You've become what they secretly crave, someone who can be close without closing in. And when that realization lands, the power dynamic shifts permanently. They're no longer protecting themselves from you. They're protecting the connection with you. Every avoidant has a breaking point, the quiet realization that they might have underestimated you. It doesn't happen during arguments or silence. It happens in the stillness that follows, when they sense your life moving forward without their presence at its center. That's the first time they feel replaceable. And for someone who's built their identity on control, that thought is terrifying. At first, they'll pretend they're fine. They'll act busier, detached, maybe even subtly distant again. But this time, it's different. Their withdrawal isn't confidence, it's defense. Inside, they're scanning for signs that you're slipping away for good. The tone of your messages, the time it takes you to reply, the way you no longer reach for connection like before. That quiet uncertainty is the trigger. You've reversed the polarity. The psychology here is simple but powerful. Avoidance only feels safe when they control access to intimacy. But once they realize you control it, the game rewrites itself. Now they're the ones monitoring your engagement, reading your pauses, trying to interpret your calm. You've become the unpredictable element in their system, and unpredictability is the one thing they can't emotionally manage. This is where subtlety matters most. Don't flaunt your independence. Don't pose to provoke or act colder than you feel. Real confidence is quiet. It's the way you take longer to reply because you're genuinely occupied. The way you end a call first, not out of strategy, but because you're content. Your peace has become your boundary, and boundaries are the language of value. When they sense that your presence isn't guaranteed anymore, they start to behave differently. They listen longer, text sooner, show up with effort that once felt impossible. The avoidant who used to avoid risk now takes emotional risks to keep your attention. They're no longer running from you. They're running toward you. And that shift didn't come from confrontation or manipulation. It came from power, quiet, consistent power, built on the discipline to do nothing when you wanted to do everything. When the avoidant starts showing up again, texting more often, initiating plans, even sharing pieces of their life, it's easy to mistake their pursuit for resolution. But don't confuse movement with progress. The chase is only the beginning. What you do after it determines whether the dynamic becomes a cycle or a transformation. Avoidants fall for people who create safety through unpredictability, not chaos, but controlled balance. They want to know they can approach you without being consumed. So when they start re-engaging, your next move is crucial. Don't over-reward their return. Here's the psychology behind it. For avoidance, closeness equals risk. Every time they come closer, their instinct will be to retreat just to test if it's safe. When you react emotionally to that retreat, with panic, silence, or punishment, you confirm their fear that intimacy equals instability. But when you remain centered, they experience something their nervous system can't process yet. Calm connection. That's your secret weapon, neutral consistency. You respond, but you don't rush. You listen, but you don't overinvest. You engage warmly, but you stay self-contained. This doesn't just make you seem confident. It rewires their emotional expectation. Slowly, they begin to associate being near you with safety instead of suffocation. It's subtle but powerful. You'll notice their tone soften, their guard relax, their communication deepen. The avoidant begins to realize that you're not trying to control the connection, you're inviting it. That's the first time their body feels safe enough to stop running. The trick is never to let the pendulum swing back into pursuit. Keep your rhythm steady. Avoidants only attach when they sense your emotional world won't collapse around theirs. So you anchor yourself, no matter what they do. When they start to fall, don't try to speed it up. Let the mystery breathe. Every pause, every silence, every measured response reinforces your value. You've turned their fear of closeness into a curiosity they can't resolve anywhere else, except with you. And that's the quiet moment when the avoidant, who once needed distance to feel safe, starts needing your calm to stay sane. You'll know you've won when the energy stops feeling like a game at all. The avoidant who once retreated behind silence will start showing up with something closer to honesty. It won't be dramatic. It'll sound like, I didn't realize I pushed you away, or I just feel calmer with you. What they're really saying is that your steadiness taught their nervous system a new language. That's the point of mastery. You never chased, you changed the rhythm. You stopped arguing with distance and started embodying self-control. Every time you stayed composed instead of reactive, you dismantled the reward system that powered their avoidance. Now, the only way for them to feel secure is through consistency, and consistency is what you control. From here, the work becomes quieter. You keep boundaries, you keep life moving, you answer when you choose. You don't punish or withdraw to keep power. You simply maintain the same energy that made them respect you in the first place. Let the conversation stay balanced. Let the connection breathe. When they move closer, match their pace, no faster. When they slow down, don't chase. The new rule is equilibrium. The irony is that by refusing to compete for their attention, you became the prize. And once they realize that your peace isn't an act, but a permanent state, they'll guard it like something rare. That's when the dynamic transforms from pursuit into partnership. You've outplayed the avoidant not through tricks, but through self-command, the one force they can't manipulate. If they stay, it's because they choose to. If they leave, you don't collapse. Either way, you've already won, because the person who no longer needs to chase is the one who finally leads. If this series helped you see the pattern clearly, drop a comment, subscribe for more insights, and share it with someone who needs to learn the same calm power you've just mastered.